Good afternoon. How are you? Well, Thomas Jefferson has more good news for us as compared to recent storms. It's 49 degrees out and the humidity is 37, but the wind has been 17 miles an hour, and I've been in it. It's nothing right now, but it was pretty serious. So it would affect the mic, obviously, but it's not presently. The First Amendment to the Constitution, as we know, is to give us a guardrail against government excesses, or to inform them of things that without our input they wouldn't know. And a fair amount of that is about the government not doing its job. And I think that's going to be more certain now as the House and Senate is split, as the White House is trying to have the new Reich, a government by a petty monarch, Trump. Now, the First Amendment is to help us navigate such attacks on our system, our democracy. But you may have noticed how no one is safe from the radical changes that felon Trump wants. And among those are the media. Those that actually ask tough questions, which you think is their job, and who report on it, and respectively bring out the errors of the waves of Trump. So the latest casualty in the war against the First Amendment, in my opinion, is Jim Acosta at CNN. Now, years ago, I had a conversation with him in the green room, waiting to get on to another show. And he said something that plainly had occurred before his time, but not mine. And I said, that's interesting that you know that. I said, how do you know that? I said, that happened before your time. And he explained how he had read everything he could all the time. And so that's why he knew about it. And that's among the things that made him the reporter that he was. He was careful, he was respectful, he was firm, and he's the kind of person that we want recognized among our journalists. And CNN has been squeezing him out. He had yesterday was his 10 o'clock show, and he explained that he was being pushed to accept other time slots, midnight, considered by journalists to be the graveyard shift on TV. And so he said he would go off and do other things. Now, we've had a reporter driven out at the New York Times because they wanted to edit more his pieces, cut off his newsletter. We've seen how newspapers during the campaign would be encouraged to take a certain endorsement for Harris, who is the Democratic candidate for president, both the LA Times and the Washington Post. And so this has been a problem that felon Trump and his corrupt minion want to squeeze independent journalists, who will call it as they see it, out of the business. They don't want them interfering with the message that Trump wants. So, is this having any effect on Trump? Well, it's only been a week plus, and it appears that in terms of his favorable ratings, he's lost 10 points in that time. There's the candidate of promise, and then there's the candidate that you get. So we're seeing resistance. Now, walking off CNN, could a man who was an independent journalist continue in a situation like that? Would it be an indignity just to have the job for the income? And so they're trying to buy a person's ethics cheaply. And in the bargain, they're trying to compromise the kind of information we get about what's going on. We already see it because there are eyes everywhere, just like this phone I'm handling as I'm talking to you now. People can do mini broadcasts, and they will. So let's choose another one. You have inspector generals. Once I considered becoming an inspector general years ago, but I was working on the Hill and I was writing a report and an investigation on the confirmation hearings of Raymond Donovan. And I didn't go forward with that. But because of it, I knew some inspector generals or inspectors general. And these men and women were very impressive, usually former prosecutors, but not necessarily. And they had the ability to reform government in the sense of making it honest, fair, delivering, eliminating waste and fraud. That was their charge. Now, Trump approved getting rid of 17 inspectors general. And the two that he did not get rid of, one was at the Justice Department, and the other, I believe, was at the State Department. Of these, only one resisted being fired. Phyllis Fong, who is the USDA Inspector General, refused to comply. And she said that the termination notices were unlawful. And I hope that besides being forced to be let out by the shock troopers that are wandering through the streets of Washington at the behest of Trump, I wonder if she'll go to court over this. Now, I'm sure she could have whatever career she wants. She's been doing this for 22 years. And that's not something to ignore. That is a person who has information, experience, contacts, approaches, knows the law, and can make a difference because of it. Who are we going to put in instead? Who could take that position and be taken seriously? What was the basis for getting rid of the 17? The blanket statement was these inspector generals were a rogue. They were partisan bureaucrats. Imagine that, will you? Now, I have a feeling that that's going to come and bite him in his hefty hindquarters. There's another one that shows the weakness and the lack of care and the lack of responsiveness of he who would be our dictator. Trump signed a freeze on trillions of grants and loans, including health care, to millions. It's just remarkable. And so what happens here? What can we do about that? Well, what happened is a judge decided that was unacceptable. And he immediately stopped the freeze. The judge said, "That dog don't hunt." Didn't actually say that, but I'm having a little fun here. Who came to the aid of all these people who would suffer? And the answer is a group did, called Democracy Forward. They sued. And theirs is the motion that caused the freeze to itself be frozen, to be stopped. Now the story doesn't end there. There's another encouraging sign. Nobody from Congress got out there and sued, but 22 state AGs did. And they said it was a violation of separation of powers, which it was. In other words, these funds were dedicated by Congress, approved by the president, the former president. They are, by the law of the land, to be fulfilled by the executive. And Trump broke that. He broke that connection. And what happened? Well, the White House backed down. They disappeared in a cloud of BS dust. And as a result, this didn't happen. And the case is unnecessary because the White House pulled in its fangs. Tariffs are how Trump keeps saying he's going to save America. And he knows, and anybody else does, and those people who give cover to tariffs are afraid to knock something they may use in different quarters for themselves. But tariffs are not just about trade. And in that sense, that's about picking winners domestically and passing the inefficiencies and cost of the local domestic United States companies against imports that might be cheaper and better. And I'll talk about one of those in a moment. But Trump, who is Mr. Transactional, he bargains for other things. If you don't do what I want you to do, South American country, and let me land these persons in your country, I'm going to increase the tariffs for these products that you bring into the United States. So he's become a transactional president. And I said the other day that McKinley, one of his big errors was to ride the horse of tariffs publicly, and it didn't work so well. Now let's return to the question of the wealth. Remember how we had all those billionaires all gathered together at Trump's inauguration day? And one of the big things they're talking about is how they've got a handle on AI and they're going to do great things with it. Well, it turns out there's a Chinese company that can do it cheaper and better AI. So that sucks the wind out of our billionaires as opposed to this less expensive Chinese solution. Let me go back to the reason for the freeze. What's the explanation? Why would you cut off $1 trillion? Why would you do this to people? Why would you scare the living daylights out of them? Did you always intend to back off if anybody pushed on you, which is an instruction to us to push and to fight and to oppose this guy at every chance that we have? And whether that happens remains to be seen. So here's the kicker. The guy from OMB, he said the use of federal resources to advance market equity, transgenderism, and Green New Deal social engineering policies. That's what they want. So that's what I got for you today, this day among my trees. All the best. Bye-bye.